Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to make a start. Thank you very much and a warm welcome to all to attending our SolarWinds technical update. I'm Matt Crane. I'm Head of Sales and Marketing here at Prosperon Networks. Joining me today is Mark Roberts, our Technical Director.
Good morning.
Hi, Mark. And there's a couple of ways. First slide, hopefully you can all see the slides. Obviously, if you can't, then please use the chat window, but I think we're okay. We've done some checks. There's a couple of ways you can keep an eye on Prosperon Networks and what we get up to. For those of you that don't know, we're a SolarWinds partner. And there's a couple of ways here that you can just to keep an eye on what we're up to. With some announcements there on our blogs, blog links, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. If we can move on to the agenda, so we can just go through, there's quite a lot to cover today. SolarWinds have been very, very busy over the last 6 to 8 weeks with some new product versions coming out. Some of you will be aware of those, but you can see there we've got a long list, mainly on the networking side, of new version releases from SolarWinds. So I'm going to hand over to Mark quite shortly, who's going to be going through a few slides, not too many, but then launching into a demonstration on some of those key features that we've got there. So for those of you that don't know too much about Prosperon, obviously many of you do, a quick introduction in terms of, obviously we've been a partner now for actually 13 years, not 12. We haven't quite updated our graphic there. But we've been partners with SolarWinds for obviously a very long time and seen a great deal of changes through the vendor in terms of product acquisitions, new versions. And we obviously, some of you know that we have a very strong professional services offering as well, where we help a lot of customers improve their existing installations. And possibly for those that are just embarking on their SolarWinds journey, we help them get into a good position straight from the word go. In terms of some useful resources that you can see, obviously we've got a YouTube link where this particular webinar obviously is being recorded, and we'll be posting that up onto our YouTube channel a little bit later, perhaps today or early tomorrow. Keep an eye on the website also there, in particular for the insight pages, where we're going into little details and tips and tricks about products that you will, some of you will be using already, and perhaps others that don't use some of the products.
There'll be a new blog going up today, mate, in fact.
Okay. Can you share what that's about, just quickly, Mark?
Should we tease them now? Of course. It's going to be about logging. So SolarWinds have a number of log methods, and we're going to be talking about the new one coming up very shortly. But the whole blog is about all of those options.
Good stuff. So keep an eye on that one, folks. It's going to come out quite shortly, as Mark says today. We have a really close partnership with SolarWinds. You'll see there on the bottom left of the screen, we're regular contributors to the annual THWAC camp that's held in Austin, in SolarWinds headquarters. And second in from the left there is Mark there with a cleanly shaven facial expression going on. And we also, obviously, many of you will have had our engineers on site. We're close to doing sort of 400 plus days on site with customers now. Together with offering some real professional support assistance there as well. All our engineers obviously are accredited engineers for SolarWinds, and some of us are also security cleared, so we can work on those really sensitive sites. Quite recently, we've got a second award for MVP on THWAC, and THWAC, if you don't know, is the SolarWinds community, where a lot of content and information is shared on that particular platform. And MVP status gives us real direct insight and makes us, gives us the ability to contribute to those. And Mark here is one of our MVPs, and we have Antonis, another one of our senior engineers, who's recently been awarded his MVP status. So that's terrific news. It just goes to show what a good relationship we have with SolarWinds as well. So moving forward, let's have a look, Mark, in terms of the next slide. We like to do on these, some of you attended recent webinars, we like to make them a little bit interactive. There aren't too many on this session, but because this is about new features, we're quite curious in terms of whether you guys have taken the leap and upgraded some of your version releases yet. So we're going to launch a quick poll, which just gives us some insight in terms of where you guys are in terms of the recent upgrades. So if you can answer that for us, and we'll get some results back and share them out with you all as well. Leave that for a couple of seconds to get going. So when we've done that quick poll, Mark and I will have a quick chat about that. And then we'll move slightly on. So where have we got here? So, okay, so some of you have taken the leap already. Some of you are dipping your feet into the water and upgraded some. And no surprises there. No, I need help as a greater majority. And in particular, I mean, going back to some of our professional services guys, is we are here to help get you guys onto either new platforms or to help get some of those particular modules upgraded. So you can take advantage of the new features that Mark will be busying himself showing you in the next 40-50 minutes or so. So Mark, no great surprises there in those results.
No.
I think that's pretty much what we've seen.
Exactly, it's one of those things in IT. If it's not broken, don't fix it. But hopefully, what we're going to be able to do today is whet your appetites to allow you to identify the new features. SolarWinds are very active developers, so they will be releasing 2 versions of most of their products each year, and so keeping on top of that can be challenging. IT departments don't always have the resources to review and understand and identify whether to the upgrades, and then obviously going through the process themselves and then applying those new features, because some of them are very straightforward, some of them are a bit more involved to get in place. And I see we've already got a question come through from Matthew that he is planning on upgrading this afternoon. So,
oh God, this
all...
information could be quite useful, Matthew, too. Then.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much for taking part in that poll. We're going to talk about how we can help later on after the live demos. Mark, I'm going to hand over to you now. There's a few slides that we wanted to share with you on some of these core feature updates. So I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much. I say the purpose of today is that we can kind of give over some information on the new features. Now, there are some significant ones. There are some under the hood engine related ones, and as I said just a moment ago, in terms of it's not broken, don't fix it, there are drivers clearly with regards upgrading. There are the new features, the ability to take advantage of those. There is also the aspects of support. SolarWinds support the last 2 major releases of the products, and so therefore at that point, if you raise a ticket with SolarWinds, they're often then going to just ask you to upgrade to keep within that time period. So having said that, when do you upgrade? Well, the release of the software came out on the beginning of April, and there are some brave people out there that immediately will just say, yep, I want this new feature, or it fixes something that I needed to have available. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And in those circumstances, we often say that's absolutely fine, but it's new software. There are some big new features, code changes that introduce potential new features, let's say, and so we do recommend you kind of leave it a few weeks. That's why we're having this webinar now, before you perform that upgrade. Let the rest of the world go through that bleeding edge situation. SolarWinds have brought out a couple of hot fixes for issues that have been found, so we are very much in a situation where we feel that it's now a good time to be upgrading. So on the slide that I'm showing you at the moment, I've got the NPM. So NPM for us is a fundamental. It's the solution that monitors and does most of the heavy lifting with regards to core functionality. So I've combined this with the kind of core features that extend throughout the entire platform and cover other modules as well. So at the top, we've got scalability. Now, 100,000 elements is a large number. And what SolarWinds have done in this release, have actually extended that to 400,000. So if there's anyone on the session today that are running very large installations, or indeed have multiple Orion installations that maybe they've split across because of scaling with the Enterprise Operations Console tying them together, this may well be a big review point to identify any architectural changes to take advantage of those scaling. From an NPM and an NCM point of view, the Network Insight function. Now, we've previously had that with Network Insight for ASAs. So for those of you that have had 12 dot something installed of NPM, you'd have been seeing that data being captured from ASAs is now very good, it's very strong, it's very complete. Well, that is now been extended to the Nexus platform from Cisco. And you can see the key things that we have on here are a collection of VPC data, the virtual port channel. So this is something which we have seen quite a lot of use actually, where kind of virtual channels are being created. I'll take you through how you can visualize that. And also the fact that these devices can be configured as virtual sub-devices. And so those virtual contexts, we're able to back those up as individual items now, as we would whether it's a physical box. And a lot of this information has been extended into simplification. So moving to new views, new presentations, new widgets, improved hover over in the displays. As you can see on the right-hand side, I've given an example of that, of the ability to easily grab data and without having to click around and without having to drill down, you can get top-level information very quickly. One of the big things that I really like is the perf stack, so performance stack view. It was a singular view. You went into there, you looked at your views, you saved them, you came back to on a regular basis. A fantastic way of displaying information. Well, this release has now brought the ability to create a widget based on a perf stock profile. And so now this can be embedded into any page within Orion. And the stack chart display really does strengthen the way that data can be retrieved and visualized within the web interface. The mapping feature in Orion. Now, we speak to customers on a regular basis, and myself and my engineers are constantly using the Network Atlas, and love it or loathe it. I won't put a margin on there. It does things very well. It also has many foibles and issues. And so from that point of view, SolarWinds are well aware of that. There's been lots of discussions with us and various other people about how to improve it. What we have now is the kind of beginning of what SolarWinds are going to be doing with regards to mapping functionality. At the moment, it's taking topology data, it's automatically visualizing information. You can see on the bottom right that we have an example of that. And we also have this fired into the SAM application method as well. So we can now start seeing topology through the network layer to the application, but also in terms of connections. Anyone that's used NetStat, what I'll be showing you today is going to be very familiar, but very powerful once we tie this into monitoring data. And then the last one on this list is UPS. So for those of you that are running smart UPS devices, there is literally, when you do list resources, a tick box, and then the key information will be displayed, and there is a pre-built page to show all that information out. So no more custom polar creation for those device types now. It's all very much simplified. For NCM, again, as I said before, with regards the Nexus support, NPM and NCM very much are sharing the extension of that network insight function for Nexus, where we're able to back up configurations. We're able to see configuration snippets for interfaces, and very powerfully, we are also seeing access control list definitions. Again, this is something that has been available for some time for ASAs, and it should be on ASAs. ASAs are firewall devices, they're blocking ports, but many customers are also, as part of kind of best practice methodology these days, of putting security within the access layer as well. So from that point of view, we'll see how we can leverage visibility on those. We also have at the bottom there, if you are using the firmware upgrade functionality within NCM, there is now automatic support for Nexus platforms. Matt, were you coming in with a question there? I heard.
No, I wasn't.
No, okay, sorry. Apologies. Now, just as a reminder, actually, I should have said this at the beginning, so forgive me. Please ask questions as we go along here. If you're seeing functionality, I'm not giving the full details, or you want to understand how it works or how you can benefit, please use the chat panel within your GoToMeeting window to push across some questions, because one of the questions that's come along is, what about existing UPSs being monitored? Yes, so in terms of that, Mark, what you do need to do with that is just do a list resources on those devices, tick the box for UPS monitoring, and you can then go away and disable your custom pollers because they will be replaced with this new fangled fancy functionality. Okay, on to SAM. So there's a few things added in here. I've already again touched on the fact that we have the application mapping functionality, and to allow that to work, when we use the agent to monitor a server, this must use the agent because we need to capture this data. This is, as I say, performing localized data collection for network port, TCP port connectivity, inbound and outbound now with the 6.1 release Previously, it was just incoming. So now what we are able to do is collate information with regards what the server is, what applications are being monitored on it, and tie those two together based on the connections that are coming in and out. And you can see on the screen there at the moment, we have an Exchange server listed on the right-hand side. We are monitoring Exchange, and we're now seeing that there are connections running to there. We can see their individual performance in terms of latency and packet loss. And as I'll show you in the demo, we'll then be able to get further information as we drill into that information. So from a usage perspective, when you have servers that are not performing well, or that there are TCP port connection issues, maybe there's pooling problems or connection pool resources consuming all of the ports, this is going to be a great way to visualize that and identify how that is affecting the performance of the application. Linux, so when polling Linux via SNMP, for quite some time we see on a regular basis, because of SNMPD version issues, that the Linux agent doesn't always provide us useful information all the way through or accurate information. And from there, then we have the ability now to collect the 1 minute, 5 minute, 15 minute low averages for CPU. And so this is going to give us a kind of bigger, better, and actually more accurate insight into the performance of a Linux CPU. And the last one there is the fact that if you're running IBM AIX, an agent for Orion can now be deployed to that platform. Okay, very quickly on IPAM, there wasn't an awful lot added to here. If you're running your DNS in either Amazon under Route 53 or under the Azure DNS platform service, we can tie in and we can add those resources to pull down DNS records. And so that gives you the ability to look at all of the DNS records that are there, perform analysis on forward and reverse lookups, identify if there are mismatches between those. So if you are running those and you have IPAM, we do strongly recommend that you put that connection in place on that. And then the last, the middle one there, IP request. So from a management point of view in IPAM, users have the ability to go in and say, I want to look at the IP addresses, what's used, what's free. Okay, I see there's one free, I'm going to grab it for myself. And that is going to then allow that person to manage that space. But clearly, that is an administration point of view. And so not everyone is going to have that functionality. So SolarWinds has added this kind of IP request form, this wizard that any user that has access to Orion can utilize to look and identify a block of contiguous IPs, or the fact that I want 8 IP addresses and put a reservation through to the DHCP server. So this, simplifies management. It extends the ability for users to perform management tasks, so it's proving very useful. And also there are a number of ways of SolarWinds have applied improvements to overlapping subnets. This is particularly relevant where organizations are taking over new businesses or new entities where IP space is being the same as existing, and also for managed service providers. So the use of additional polling engines to collect data now allows native routing to those spaces, and there is a grouping structure. So you can see in the bottom there we've got the group name for the hierarchy, so we can put these objects into those to have logical management separation.
So Mark, on this one, just sorry to interject, but a lot of the guys on today's webinar might have been around for version 3 of NTA, which obviously was back then on an SQL platform. I imagine a lot of these guys are going to have NTA. We know it's a very popular module. So in the earlier version of NTA, we know that SolarWinds adopts a different method outside of SQL, but now they've flipped again and come back to SQL. So what are the reasons for that? I'm sure you're going to cover as well, but just a particular interest, because it's a big change for a platform to change it back into a different database.
Yeah,
so can you
exactly.
Those reasons?
Yeah, so originally when SolarWinds brought the NetFlow module out, they used the same single database, Microsoft SQL database, that they were using for the Orion core. Now, the problem with that is the way that the flow records work, the volume, the structure of them, they are not conducive to a row architected database, which in those days, was what SQL Server provided. And because of that, there were massive, and I say massive, performance issues with utilizing that database technology. It didn't scale well. The page load time was very poor. You certainly couldn't do any kind of reporting on it, mainly because the data requests were very slow to come out, but also the fact that because of the volume and the structure of that data, we were only storing literally a matter of hours worth of detail. And then there were a whole range of algorithms that were then compressing that data. So what SolarWinds did, they went away and they took a column architected database. So they were using a flat file version of a database called FastBit, and that allowed them to extend the performance capability. And providing a column architected method meant that the structure was more conducive, indexing was better. So we went from a situation of literally 4 hours worth of detailed data and then compression to collecting minute data over 30 days. So that was a massive leap in that regard. The problem with then they encountered was that having a separate database meant that some data was in the core SQL Server database, some was in the FastBit database, and communication between the two itself was not as good as they would like. So from that point of view, it was a case of how could they improve it? They've been going through many options, but what happened with SQL Server 2016 release is that Microsoft added support for column architecture. So now we have the ability to have a database using that technology. Now we have internal communication performance benefits of its SQL to SQL Server communication, and now that has had a big improvement in terms of improvement performance again, and also scaling. So the data sizing is much smaller than it was before.
So it's a better environment for the transactional voluminous nature of flow transactions in the way. So
yeah,
we're back to a more accurate picture in terms of with an SQL supporting environment, which is great.
Yeah. Without going into the technical aspects of the read and write process that occurs, the load that's placed on the database was quite significant, because before you write anything, you have to read. Is this an update query? Is this a new session that we're recording? And so we're talking about millions and millions and millions of records. And so, yeah, this has been a much better method. So you do therefore need to have an ability to provision a SQL Server 2016 instance.
Yeah. So just on that, folks, before we move on to the next slide or the next part, we will be shortly sending out, I'm not sure when it is, perhaps within the next 5 days, a separate email to you all specifically about the changes in NTA with a bit more detail in here. So just be on the lookout for that, which is probably going to help you when you decide to move, if some of you are still yet to upgrade that platform.
Okay, so with regards to NetFlow, as I say, you do need SQL Server 2016. What the suggestion here is that we identify how many flows per second you're receiving and processing, both now and obviously look towards the future if that's going to grow, and move your core database, your Orion database, and the NetFlow database onto that instance. If it's below around 10,000 flows per second on an average size SQL Server, we can put it on the same instance. We do recommend a dedicated volume for the NetFlow database files compared to where the Orion database files are, but the option, if you're above that, is then to provision a separate dedicated SQL Server for the NTA data store.
Mark, we've had a couple of questions coming in about scaling, not just on NTA, but also on NPM as well, from John as well as Nick there. And John's more is regarding scalability on NPM and how the elements are split across the polars that people might have. I don't know whether you want to take that on now or perhaps later on after you've done the live demo.
Yeah, we'll come back to some of those questions, but with regards the NetFlow scaling and the overall core scaling, when you have a very large instance, when you have flow per second rates of over 10,000, the recommended model is that the Orion core database is on one SQL server, the NetFlow database is on a dedicated separate SQL server.
So no changes there, I suppose, in that kind of architecture.
You can use the same hardware that you were using for the FastBit database previously, perhaps. Is an opportunity to get the specification and tuned and right for what you're using now. So yeah, there are obviously at that point review process to determine which is the right direction to go in.
Okay, so hopefully, John, Nick, that answers your questions, but we're going to probably be covering scaling a little bit more. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll come back once if we have some. Yeah. And if you do not have SQL Server yet, or you do not have the ability, currently you can still maintain support for version 4.2.3 of NTA, which will maintain the use of the fast-bit data store. All of the other Orion applications can go up to the latest releases, but please be aware that in the next release, and this is probably going to come towards the end of this year, that you will then be in a position where you will, to upgrade the Orion other applications, NPM, NCM, etc. You will then need some provision over to SQL Server 2016. Also, actually, just touching on that, sorry, Matt, is support for 2012 OS is also going to be deprecated. So this is very much a planning stage to make sure your resources, so using OS 2016 and a minimum of SQL Server 2016 as well.
Okay, while it's still relevant, obviously a question is obviously in terms of what happens to historical data mark from when we transition from fastbit to SQL. Is that still maintained?
No, so because the NetFlow data is very transient in nature, we're only storing it for short periods of time, and the database technology is so different, SolarWinds have not included the ability to migrate the data over. So when you do upgrade and you migrate to the 2016 database, it will not carry over the historic data. And as I say, typically the default value is 30 days worth.
Okay. Let's fast track. Let's move on to the slides because we don't want to kill everybody with pain point of PowerPoint presentation death.
So there's some things that we can pick up offline as well. So,
sure.
Okay, VNQM. The key thing here is if you are running SIP under your Cisco Call Manager platform, we are now capturing SIP data, so we can see SIP trunk utilization, call quality, and also correlate this through to the CDR records as well. So I will hopefully get to show you that within that platform. Also, the SIP data is available in the PerfStack functionality, and for those of you that are running Cisco iOS 15 that have the VNQM for IPSLA on there, we are now able to support the creation and editing and monitoring of IPSLA on that iOS platform. Previously it was problematic, it was a manual configuration, but now you can do this fully within the GUI. So if you've got one IPSLA operation to deploy or thousands, you can literally do that in the space of 5 minutes through the web GUI now. So really, really nice update to that. Very quickly on the Storage Resource Monitor, not very exciting. There's no new major features except for support for further arrays. We're seeing quite a lot of people with Nimbles coming along, for one in particular. So if you do have these arrays and you have Storage Resource Monitor, you can now add them. And obviously if you've been running these devices on here and it's prevented you from taking advantage of the Storage Resource Monitor, you now have the ability to obviously look at that to include and extend your Orion monitoring platform. And then the last one that I want to show you here before we cut across to our online demo is the Database Performance Analyzer. And we're concentrating on new features in Orion. This very much fits in with that because the integration of that data is much stronger. Again, integration to PerfStack has been improved. We're collecting blocking and deadlocks, key performance metrics on database performance, and also correlation to all of the database instances. In terms of the application itself, there's better data with regards to always-on availability groups, basic availability groups if you're using those in standard edition, so we can see the quality, the status and the health of those. And also at the bottom there, you can see that additional database technology versions have also been improved. Okay, so enough of the demo. Let's cut across to our online screens. So what we're using here is the online demo. So if you're looking at this, if you want to have a look at the new features, you can go to this address. It's publicly accessible. Just click on the login button and this will immediately take you into this interface. So the first thing I want to kind of look at here is the those core functionality things with regards Nexus. But here, before I move off of this page, here is an example of the PerfStack. If you've not used PerfStack before, please do have a look at this page. Have a look at one of our previous webinars to see how you can benefit from this, because this is a massively, massively useful function. But what we can see in here is an embed widget. This has been created in the Perf static display. It's been saved as a profile, and now you have the ability to edit a page just by customizing the page, clicking on the search to add a widget here. So obviously in this demo, I don't have the ability to list all of these, but at this point you would search for your profile name and you literally just drag and drop it over to the left-hand side. So this can be shown out on any summary page. Okay, so I'm going to go into one of the Nexus devices here, and you can see here that we need to log in. And one of my staged ones, I'll make sure that's refreshed. Okay, so I've clicked into a node details of a Nexus. And the first thing you can see in the top middle here is the fact that we have our virtual device context, our VDCs displayed. And immediately it's telling me that I'm not monitoring these VDCs. So I can click on this, add it as an object. This is going to add it as a virtual device in its own right in Orion, and it will also tie this together. So from within each of these, you can cross-correlate and you can see how the fact that this VDC2 is part of the Nexus 1 device. As I scroll down, you can see I've got my health. If I have a stack Nexus here, I would also see the hardware health breakdown for each of those stack members. But the good thing about this interface, SolarWinds obviously identified that Nexus devices have many interfaces or can have many interfaces. I think we're up to about 700 and something interfaces as the biggest one that I've seen with a customer. And when you have that number of interfaces, it can be very difficult to see the wood for the trees. So they've created this interface where you can kind of drill in and immediately do a kind of search. You can use inline filters over the left-hand side. So if you just want to display interfaces that are running in a critical condition, you can do so. And so you can see how interactive this is. This is very much the ethos of where SolarWinds are going to make this as easy as possible to get access to the information. So from this, we can see that we've got our interfaces. I'm going to drill into one of my interfaces here. And what we have is some further capabilities has been added. So this is very familiar. This hasn't changed here, but if I move down here, you can see one of the new widgets is the interface configuration. So where we are collecting with NCM, the device backup, this is now splitting out this particular entry, so we can see how this interface is configured on that device. Clearly very useful information when we're analyzing the health, performance and status of an object such as this. Now, when I go back here, one of the things actually that you have now is this new kind of popover. So here, previously, it was a kind of static thing. You had this kind of tabular situation, but you've now got this commands. So we can do things interactively in here. Let's say this is saving you drilling down often. It's allowing you to interact and perform management tasks. So this is a bit improved. If we had custom properties, they would also be listed out under that entry. If I come down here into my VPC tab, so automatically when you upgrade, the node details page will be updated to include these new sub tab menus. And so now for this device, all of the VPCs are now listed. We can see those port channel names. We can hover over and see the definition. So on this one, you can see that there are 3 interfaces that's been configured into this virtual port channel. And if I hover over this one here, actually, this is a more complex one, we've got a number. I also have the ability, again, to move up and to get access to information here. So you see a hover over appears. I can see the utilization on that link. I can see the configuration of that, and I can drill in and have a look at this in more detail. So navigation speed and efficiency significantly improved. And again, on the right-hand side, I can click on the config. This is now going to give me my interface configuration on this device, on this VPC. I can see the configuration of all the interfaces within that VPC. And I can also see how this port channel is connecting to another device. So the fact that we've got another Nexus, clearly needed, we've now got both sides of that VPC. So we can see all of the information within a single screen. So again, I don't know if there's many of you using Nexus VPC functionality, but if you are, it's a really, really strong benefit. Okay, I'm now going to show you the access lists. Now, we are seeing many people using access lists on the Nexus platform. What we have when we analyze this, and if you don't have Nexus, but you do have ASAs, get my speech right, this is exactly the same functionality. So if you are using those, then please look at using this capability, because this will only improve the level of information you can access. Now, all of the ACLs are defined. You can see any issues that we have are going to be identified. So it's not just about giving you the ACLs. It's not just about saying, here's the configuration, here's the definition of this ACL. It's also doing analysis to say, okay, I've got an ACL, I've got other ACLs, I've got rules within the ACL, and it's going to give us the visualization that there are redundant rules, there are shadowing rules, and so from this, we can go through and clean up our rules. So on this one, we've got 3. You can see there's one of 3 different types. So if I click on this, this will now bring through my configuration. So now we can see the actual rules within that ACL. On the right-hand side, you can see how many times this has been hit. So from this point of view, you can see since this restart of this device, or restart of that service on the device, the ACL rules have been hit. So this again is really useful to identify whether an ACL is actually active and it's doing a job. And what we've got on the left-hand side is this, again, warning triangle. It's telling us in this case that there is a fully shadowed rule. Click on the definition, and it will tell you that which one is to blame. Now, from this point of view, you could look at that and say, yep, well, there's a reason for that. That's fine. But in most situations, from what we've seen already, this is allowing customers to clean up and say, okay, we don't need so many rules. This may be going across to another ACL where we've got a number of parameters causing problems. Now, the one that I've done here is a very small ACL. Clearly, you can have ACL rules with lots of things in there. And so from that point of view, as I say, we want to be able to clean that up. Okay, so I'm just going to go across to my map screen. And so this is something with, oh, wrong one. I'm just going to go across and show you the visualizations of the maps. And I'm going to choose a particular device here. I'm going to go across to one of my core switches, or actually in the online demo, one of the core switches, and introduce you to the map interface. So on the left-hand side, we have our map. And so when we look at this, this is going to give us an automatic visualization. Your mapping that you're going to be able to do in future is going to be enhanced based on this interface as well. And so we've got our device, and because the topology data we're collecting, you can see that we're connected to this device, to this device, and this device. We're monitoring the interfaces, and so we can now see utilization. We can see the fact that if I hover over, there are errors and discards on this link. If I click on this link, on the right-hand side now, you can see my detail information. We can see the utilization. We can see the definition of this. We can click into this and view more details. The fact that this device is connected, if we click on this WAN object, we're seeing not just the utilization of this, we're seeing its status and health, but also other sub-monitoring. The fact that on this device, we've got WAN checks using IPSLA. So again, it's not just about individual singular information sets. SolarWinds is collecting and collating that across a number of things: hardware health, IPSLA, net path operations, all going to be displayed within this screen. Now that's a great one with regards to the kind of network side of things. But for those users that have SAM, we have the demo gods are not smiling on me. Hopefully this will work. Just see that this has started. I've got with an error. But so what we are collecting here, say, is this kind of netstat information. What TCP port connections we've got coming in. So once we collect that, We're then able to then list those, which you can see there. You can see there are problems between there. There may be packet loss or latency issues. There may be high counts. We're then correlating that data into a map. And when we visualize this on a map, you can see that we've got this server is making connections to a number of servers. Well, of course, this server is doing monitoring. So we're actually monitoring and connecting over to these objects. Well, when I click on these lines, it's going to give me the connections that are taking place between this object and this object for the processes that we're monitoring on either side. Now, in this sense, we're not monitoring a process on the Confluent server side, but we are monitoring the processes on the Orion side. And you can see here, it's identified that the TCP port connection from Orion to this server is using this process. If you click on the connection details, this will take you through some more detailed information where we can see the ports that are being used. You can see we've got the ability to add monitoring over to the other side, so we can now correlate both of those through, and we've got our events list. So certainly where you have situations where you've got applications that rely on other servers and systems, whether you've got a web server using a database server or an application tying into Java or something. If we're monitoring both of those sides or even just one side, the port usage, the IOPS, the CPU and memory, all going to be coming visible on here. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Voice and Network Quality Manager. We are running a little bit over, so I'm going to just show you from here. When I go into, so while that's loading up, Christian's put are port connections collated over time? No, so this is the current information. Okay, so the event list will show you historic issues that were identified, but that is the last poll data. There's going to be a value on there to tell you when that was. Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. Okay, so we'll have a look at the SIP functionality available in Voice and Network Quality Manager. So we're seeing, again, a lot of customers now utilizing in their call manager, the fact that they're doing SIP communication. So here I've got a Cisco call manager. If I click into the details page, as I scroll down, you can see the SIP trunk definitions. You can see the information about them, what pool they're in. If I click on one of these, you're going to get its status. You're also going to get its activity. So from this point of view, we can see that we've got how many active calls are running, how many attempted, complete, or in progress. If I scroll this over on the right-hand side, we can change the time frame. Have a look at this. So now you're getting strong visualizations. If we had this data correlated to IPSLA as well, then we would have that enhanced, so we can see communication quality before on the network layer. And we've also got the inventory and the configuration status of this, including things like the codecs that are in use, which profile is assigned to. So this we're seeing within this interface. If I cut across to the search functionality, if you are configuring your VNQM to collect the call data records, so I'm just going to do this on here. We've got a new call protocol window. You can see actually as I hover over there, the breakdown of the ones that are supported, some of the ones that are supported, they are not all of them. And if I do a search now, obviously there are other search parameters available, we can now see the results of those. So now we can see individual calls that are taking place over SIP, we can see the status of them, we can see the performance of them, we can drill in and have a look at the details. And then the last one that I wanted to show you in terms of the demonstration here with regards to databases. So the DPA application and integration module for Orion is now giving us visibility of further database types. So if you're running Azure databases, if you're using the AWS hosted service database, or indeed any of the other supported database types, we can now see that we've got support for those. I'm going to click into one of my databases here because one of the widgets that I wanted to show you here in terms of a new feature. Now, Database Performance Analyzer different to SAM is it's all about query performance. It's all about the reason why waits, deadlocks, blocks are occurring. So we can identify individual queries, how they are performing, why they're running slowly. So this widget here is the new one that I wanted to display. You can see the reasons for the top waits, the root blockers, so which ones are causing the blocks to occur, and also things like deadlocks. And clearly deadlocks have a significant impact. Okay, so we don't have any data in this example now. We did all of half an hour ago, but apologies. So in terms of this, you can see we've got a query. We can have a look at the query. We can see actually the query itself. We can go and correlate that to DPA, where we'll get an understanding about why this has caused this problem. The advisor information would display whether this is related to memory or to cascading displays. Okay, so hopefully this has given you some insight in terms of the demonstration that I've just shown here. Certainly in terms of what we wanted to get across today is a little bit of an insight into those new features available in those, give you a steer to upgrade those platforms. But what we have done is left a little bit of time at the end before we move across to the questions here, just to highlight that there is a new module coming along for Orion. So obviously this is a new features webinar. We've been showing new features that have come along in recent releases. So the log manager for Orion module, as I say, is a new licensed module for the platform, and that is going to, Deborah Gods are going to smile on me or not? I may just cut across.
Oh, no.
No, it's okay. I may just cut across to our platform here. Let's have a look on running both. Excellent, there we go. So what we have here with this new module is SolarWinds are extending. They've been told for quite some time that the log management functionality already within Orion, and it's still there, you can still utilize it, is not as powerful as customers would like. They want new features, they want additional capabilities. So they've taken that, they've identified that they can create a whole new model around this. And here what we see is the summary page. We immediately get a histogram, so we've got quick identification if we've suddenly received an increase in log data. And so from here, we've got the last hour, we can change the time periods, we can go and have a look historically against this data set. Now, very much the ethos behind this is it's an operational log tool. SolarWinds have a log management solution for security, for operational function, for really kind of rolls your sleeves up, powerful functionality, automation, intelligence within that solution. This is very much about making a solution which is more conducive to the kind of lower end of the spectrum. The fact that network devices are not being added to the full-blown SIEM solution because of cost, because of budget, because of scaling perhaps. So they're providing a solution which is useful for network engineers, for systems engineers, to be able to get access to syslog and SMP trap data easily, but from an operational viewpoint. And by that, I mean the fact that we've got configuration changes occurring. So let's see if we can find, yep, so we've got a config change taking place. Yep, that's going to be a trigger to go off to NCM if you have that, to download a live config, we do real-time change detection. The fact that as we scroll through this, you can see lots of different information displays coming through. We can navigate through this, we can search for keywords, and there are a number of methods of alerting on this and tagging this. So here we've got a login attempt has been tagged. We can click on this and we can now see that this came from this device. It was this machine type, came via syslog, and the message up here was that we've had a login success by the user admin, and they came from this IP address. Well, all of that data exists in that syslog message. So taking this data, making use of it from a monitoring viewpoint, correlating this in the fact that maybe your BGP data has said that there's been a neighbor route change. Or if we're collecting log data for that, we may be able to see more clearly why that has happened. Maybe there was a message from an upstream device that it needed to change. This is part of the dynamic routing protocols, or maybe that there was a config issue detected.
So this, Mark, this is really an operational real-time way of looking at logs, isn't it? Because we've got a few questions coming in terms of how does this fit in with LEM. This is one of Christian's asked.
Yep.
And obviously a lot of people out there will probably be using the Kiwi syslog server as well. So obviously we can see the benefits of having the log information within the Orion core platform. But the key thing for us, I suppose, is where's the difference between something like a SIM and what is the difference between this log manager? Can we answer that one very quickly and briefly?
I can answer that one very quickly and briefly, but I can also guide everyone to the blog post that I created that will be going up later on this afternoon that answers that specifically. So it is confusing because SolarWinds have 8 log management
Some of them got the word log in them, some of them haven't. So good luck everybody with that.
So we can start with Kiwi. So Kiwi is cheap, it's cheerful, it's functional, it's prevalent. Every single organization has got a Kiwi syslog somewhere, I expect. Then we have the Orion platform. So Orion has and always has had a syslog and trap receiver engine within it. We've now got this new log management, log manager for Orion. Which is extending that, it's improving it. So when you want to do more things, you want to do more powerful things in Orion, then that's going to be the solution that will allow you to replace the inbuilt free functionality. So we are going to be seeing people transition across to that because of the benefits that it's going to have, the injection of this into the detail pages, the correlation between this and polled events. So at the moment, this is version 1. I do know the plans are very strong with regards to this platform, so it's only going to get more better and more powerful. And then we have the Login Event Manager, which is the full-blown security information event management solution from SolarWinds, which is not just providing operational functionality. We can do exactly as we see here. We can look for events that are doing config changes or interfaces going down, but it has intelligence. It knows when it receives a certain message type. It means something. This is a change management. This is a user logon failure. This is not just a user logon failure, but this is an interactive user logon event that we have interaction with Active Directory, that we're collecting data from application log files, from databases. So that is a whole different ballgame and takes it up to a whole different level. As I say, we see many organizations should have a SIEM solution of some flavor. Say SolarWinds Login Event Manager fits in nicely in terms of it being not too expensive, but very capable. But it provides compliance functionality. It allows archiving for long-term periods. The solutions that we've talked about in Orion here, Kiwi, Log Manager, and such like, are going to be short-term. In Orion, it's going to be kind of days worth of data, whereas in LEM, it's going to be months. It's going to be a year and more.
But a question come in, interesting one, Mark, in terms of into Log Manager and perhaps future versions that we might see. Are we going to be limiting, or is the data going to be limited to syslog and trap data, do you think, or is it other data perhaps going to be coming in?
Okay, so I need to caveat this, so I know. So whenever we talk about things that aren't in the product that are on the roadmap,
we forgot to do the caveat slide, Mark.
Yes, I have to put my line in here that this is something they are looking at. They may not add that it's a future development, but I do know that they are looking at grabbing this data from Windows Event Log as well.
Okay.
But there is going to be the distinction between kind of the SIEM solution and this. This is always going to be an operational solution, whereas the LEM solution is always going to be the SIEM, is going to be the big brother, more powerful scenario. But yes, a log manager for Orion is intended in the future to support Windows Event Log data collection. Okay.
Cool. We've got some other questions that will mean we flip back into some of those topics. So are we finished up with Logger Manager now, or do you want to? Is there still a bit more to show? Okay.
Oh, just while you were talking, I was just showing that we have a search functionality, which clearly didn't come up with anything in the time window because I changed it to an hour. But yeah, so this is really going to be much more powerful, as I say, for users to transition across from the current platform. So
okay. We had a question come in back into the Network Insights bit where we were primarily showing the Nexus side of things, Mark. I mean, in terms of Network Insights, we should be clear that it's not just catering for Nexus. There are other device types that are covered in the Network Insights part. Is that correct?
Right. Okay. So if we're referring to Network Insights, so if I bring an example of that up here, Network Insights is SolarWinds saying, we know an ASA, we know what it does, we know how it's configured, we know how it's working. And so from that point of view, they have configured Network Insight functionality, which is predefine everything that you're going to want to collect. So I'm just launching on here an ASA. I've shown you today the Network Insight for Nexus. So that is what was added in the last release for NPM and NCM. ASA has been there since 12.1, and the same kind of thing. Yeah, we've got those access lists, we've got the hardware health, we've got the interface, we've got the contexts coming through. But ASAs are doing other things. We've got site-to-site VPNs, we've got remote access VPNs. So currently, in terms of Network Insight, it's ASAs and Nexus devices, but SolarWinds are actively looking at other device types to do this for. You may be creating, for example, if you've got Palo Alto or FortiGate firewalls, a whole range of custom pollers to collect this kind of information. SolarWinds' idea is that you're not going to need to do that when you use Network Insights. Those devices, those device types are going to have all of that lovely stuff automatically included. If you do have lots of devices like checkpoints, like Palo Altos, use Thwack, post up on there that you would like those to be included in Network Insights. The more people they get coming back with that request, the quicker they're going to put that in place. We were involved with a poll recently, and there was a strong steer towards Palo Altos and FortiGate devices being the two ones that I mentioned.
Okay, let's finish up real quick with a couple of last questions back onto the scaling topic. I had a few questions come in actually in terms of how the element increase affected by the new scaling features across the pollers probably. So there's obviously people out there that have got these additional polling engines out there. So can we very quickly sort of hit that up in a nutshell?
Yeah, so the fundamentals of this is that the scaling engines themselves have not increased. For NPM, there is still a 12,000 element count limit. For SAM, it's still 10,000 monitors. For NCM, it's 10,000 devices. These are all the same. The scaling to get to 400,000, as opposed to the previous limit of 100,000, is the fact that additional polling engines can be added. So we can have dozens of now polling engines to scale up to that volume. We still have the stacked pollers, and so you can have 3 pollers on a single instance, i.e. server, to allow you to consolidate that polling as well.
And for people that have got those existing APEs out there, in terms of when they are upgrading the NPM version, Mark, do they have to be mindful of the version of additional polling engine that they're on?
Right, so I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. The first way is the fact that the polling engines, the additional web servers, must always be aligned in the version throughout. Okay. So if you have a primary server, you have 2 APE servers, you have an additional web server, they must all be running the same release. Okay. In terms of the upgrade, there is a path that you go through. Now, there are 2 methods of performing this. One, you can log on to the customer portal and you can use the upgrade advisor. Okay, so in here you choose your OS, you choose your database, your products, and you check the compatibility, and it will tell you your path that you need to go down. You can also run the latest installer on your platform, and it will list out the upgrade path that you need to perform. If you're running older versions, now I did one yesterday, and it literally took me about 3/4 of an hour because I needed to include OS upgrades and database upgrades because they were running a version 11 of NPM, and so we literally we had 7 modules, and so there was a 12-step upgrade process for those people.
Yeah.
So as I say, use the upgrade advisor, speak to us, raise a ticket with us. We're more than happy to help you identify your upgrade path and issues, because clearly what I was saying before in terms of OS, the vast majority of people are running the platform on 2012, indeed 2008. So as part of the upgrade, I would very, very strongly recommend that you upgrade your OS and your database version as well to future-proof you, lock yourself in now, benefit from the performance improvements those platforms are going to give you. So again, reach out to us and we can assist you.
definitely. I mean, on that thing, with my sales hat firmly back on my head, guys, we do have a range of professional services that, you know, cover off the upgrades. A lot of you don't have the time, as Mark has explained before, have the experience in using these, and particularly if you've got a lot of products up to upgrade, it's always really good to sort of be able to lend your ear to some good advice from us, perhaps engage with our professional services so we can come on site and do this. Obviously, not just those upgrades, but the NTA part is obviously important in terms of migrating data or putting things on a new platform. That's especially an important one, as many of you have got obviously the NTA product in place. So there are other services that we've got here, Mark, in terms of, we're seeing a lot of people reaching out to us now for integrations using the API.
Yep.
Probably haven't got a lot of time to rush into that right now.
Just steer them towards the
we've got the webinar, absolutely. Yeah, we've got on our YouTube page, folks. I highly recommend you go there. There's recordings of all of our webinars, and API was a specific one we did not too many weeks ago. It's really, really popular. Finishing out really quick, obviously training, big part of a solution is obviously, we're here to help, obviously, and what we want to see from users is to be able to take that platform on themselves and sort of configure it to get best use, because there's no one better than doing it. No one knows your requirements better than yourselves. So we have some training services for both basic and advanced levels. For those of you that are using us under your own renewals, we do support you, as Mark has mentioned before, and some of that is sometimes advice, more than tech support. Health checks is something that many of you have taken us up on in terms of a yearly review of your platforms. Perhaps before you go about a mammoth upgrade, it might be useful process to perhaps have probably a basic audit of your platform right now, which is the health check service that we provide. So these are some of the key areas where we obviously are helping a lot of our customers throughout the year in terms of their SolarWinds journeys. So I think, Mark, we can wrap up. Sorry, we've gone over about 5 minutes. We've pretty much gone through all the questions. Just to repeat there, keep your eye on the blog. It's under the Insights page on our website. The YouTube channel, as we've alluded to, has a lot of historical webinars in there, and obviously the Thwack forum from SolarWinds, really useful from some content sharing there and some tips and advice from the vendors themselves. So I think, Mark, unless you've got anything else to add, just thanks to everybody for showing. Hopefully we've answered a lot of your questions that you had. And as I say, we're going to follow this up with an email in the next couple of days, and obviously reach out to some of you as well. Just a quick one, after this session's ended, there's going to be a quick survey. Be really appreciative if you could follow up with a survey in terms of your thoughts on the webinar today and other particular aspects of that as well. That's about it from us. Thanks for joining us again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right. Bye now.